right, welcome into Purple Daily. Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, and Courtney Cronin, Vikings beat writer for ESPN.com. And we're going to continue our Tale of the Tape series here, folks, where we are lining up. First, it was the Vikings versus NFC North foes, including the Lions. We did go through the formality of doing a Lions episode.
Matt Patricia. Never tire of him.
We've gone through some NFC contenders like the Saints and the Cowboys we did recently as well.
Yeah, we all took Dak.
And Judd wants to get to the AFC contenders because he thinks the Tale of the Tape might matter in the Super Bowl at some point. We'll see if the Vikings get that far.
Jarrett Stidham's tough, man.
He's very difficult. And so is Josh Allen when the Vikings face the Bills in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
Stephon Diggs Bowl.
Yes.
But today's subject, if the Vikings do get through the NFC, they're probably going to also have to go through this team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Tom Brady, age 43. So our Tale of the Tape is quarterback, coach, total offense, total defense, and total team. We'll start with quarterback. Courtney Cronin, who do you give the Tale of the Tape advantage to? And this isn't like quarterback legacy. This is Kirk Cousins in his prime against Tom Brady at 43 years old just for this year.
Well, the one thing I worry about with Brady is his protection. I mean, they did get Tristan Wirfs in the drafts this year, but the last few years, the Tampa Bay offensive line wasn't able to protect Jameis Winston. And Jameis is a far more mobile quarterback than Tom Brady. So, I mean, that's where my concern is when I think about all of the things that could limit Tom Brady. But, we've seen this over 20-plus years with, the New England Patriots. Like, he gets the ball out quickly. It's among his best attributes. Kirk, on the other hand, behind an offensive line that there's allegedly a quote-unquote wide-open competition per Rick Spielman for those interior guard spots. That's where the pressure killed Kirk the most in 2018 and again in 2019. Like, if they don't get that fixed, that's going to be Kirk batting the ball and having issues again where he's waiting too long in the pocket. And the pressure, it's not the periphery pressure, it's the one that's coming straight at you. And I don't think Brady, even if it takes Tampa Bay's offensive line a while to gel, will have those same issues. If you're going at it a very cut and dry argument based on his legacy and kind of where he's at right now and the weapons that he has with two Pro Bowl receivers and Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, he's got Gronk again. The only thing they don't have is a running game. I think Minnesota's running game, assuming Dalvin Cook would play this year, would be second to none. And that if they are going to rely on that, that's a completely different ball game. But Kirk versus Tom Brady, I mean, this is a no-brainer. I'm going with Tom Brady.
Judley?
It was a little tougher because Kirk is, as Phil said, in his quote-unquote prime, and TB is 42 years old, and he's not coming off a great year with Patriots last year. But, of course, his weapons weren't that fantastic. So I weighed this a little bit more. But you know what? I think Brady, at least for 1 year, is going to attempt to try his hardest and be motivated enough to potentially go Favre in 2009 here. And so if we're just talking about basically pushing my chips in and saying I'll take my chances, I'm going Brady. I don't think there's probably a lot left there, but man, leaving the Patriots, leaving Belichick, and going to a team that certainly is going to have offensive weapons for him, and he is going to play his butt off most likely. As good as Kirk might be for 2020, I'm going to take my chances, and I might be wrong with Tom Brady.
So this is a more difficult conversation than I would probably have given credit on the surface. And I know that Declan has already jumped on the Tom Brady train for this one.
If you think Aaron Rodgers is washed, this guy's washed.
Or I'm sorry, on the Cousins. Yeah, you're anti-Brady, age 43.
I'm out.
And I think that is the main argument, is that like there literally has never been a quarterback at age 43 put up big numbers before. Brett Favre was 39-40, Drew Brees 40. 43 is an unprecedented age for a quarterback to put up big numbers. And when I talk about big numbers, I mean like go take your team to a Super Bowl and put up 4,000 yards, etc. It's never happened before. Of course, if there is a guy that's going to make it happen, it's probably the guy that only eats kale and sleeps in a hyperbaric chamber for 15 hours a day.
Kirk does sleep in a hyperbaric chamber. I saw it.
Really?
Yeah, I saw it on the Yahoo Sports did something. He had a discounted one, or he bought it used, and it was
Of course he did.
Well, wait a second then. Okay, so
of course he did, Courtney.
So age, checkmark Cousins.
Yes.
Hyperbaric chamber, a wash. So really we're just
I don't know if he sleeps in it during the season. I know during
I hope
the
he does.
season.
He should during the season.
I don't know, Judd. heavy those things are, and to transport that all the way back up to Minnesota.
Worth it
That's a good point.
worth it for the road games against the
Hire
Bears and the
someone to
Packers
do it
this
for
year.
you.
I think.
Yes.
But I will also give the slight edge. Until Tom Brady actually does fall off the cliff, the answer has to be Tom Brady here in the tail of the tape. So how about coach? Bruce Arians and Mike Zimmer. Courtney.
You know, as I look through this, you can point out similarities, just completely different minds. I mean, Arians is a quarterback guru, offensive mind. Zimmer is a cornerback guru, defensive mind. I think a lot of it's going to take the in-game adjustments. That's where you're going to look to see who's going to have that competitive edge, the clock management, the situational football. And I think that as we've seen with Zim and kind of the way that things have not worked out always with his offensive coordinators and then him having to step in, maybe stepping too far into the offensive side. Now he's got Gary Kubiak. And I mean, he's had Gary, but like for the last 2 years, he's had Gary Kubiak in that position where he can be like, you handle offense, I'm going to handle defense. And Todd Bowles is a terrific defensive coordinator. I mean, their defense turned around quite a bit in Tampa Bay last year. So if I'm looking at kind of like big picture-wise, the dichotomy between offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, head coach, I actually give it to Minnesota because of the continuity there that they have. And I'm wondering this year with Arians, he seems like a pretty chill type of guy who actually does the whole notion of, hey, you are my quarterback. I'm bringing you in here. What plays do you like to run? Here's a couple plays I like to run. Like this was my thought when I first started covering the NFL that this was actually how it works because they talk about this is how it works and it never actually does.
No.
I think Arians might be on a little bit more level playing field, but of actually abiding by that. But at the end of the day, it's Tom Brady. He's going to do whatever he wants. I think Zimmer's going to have a better grasp and control of that game, so I'm going to give him the edge as I look at this matchup.
Judley?
I think Courtney's probably right on grasp and control, but I'm going Arians based on this. It's an offensive league. I want an offensive guy.
Fair.
And so it's very, very close. I like them both. I think they're both very good at what they do. But I also like the fact that I think Bruce with Brady there is sort of going to become, and this is just a guess, but a Phil Jackson-like guy of, hey, I got superstars here. And I don't think...
He seems a little more stressed out than Phil Jackson.
Yeah,
though.
he does, but I don't...
more red-faced.
But I don't know if he's overbearing completely. So I'm going Arians, but barely. But I will say this. This is a matchup of the COVID-19 who shouldn't coach bowl. Because
You're right.
you could make a very good case that both of these guys, Zim and Arians, should probably be told, you know what, it'd be best to chill till 21 or
Same
a vaccine.
with Kubiak.
Absolutely,
Don
Courtney.
Capers and everybody else is over the
But
age of
both of those guys,
58.
though, seem high-stressed, high-risk, older. I'm probably going to say, why don't you let the young guys do this for 2020? Hopefully there's a vaccine in place for 21, and you guys can all come
Also,
back.
like, if you were ranking NFL head coaches based on how likely is it that they're going to spend a night in the hospital, rip off all of the different IV patches and things, and then go back to practice the next day?
Yes.
Arians has already done that.
Yes.
So we've already
Here,
seen
right?
that here in Minnesota.
Didn't he
yes.
have to be rushed to the hospital here after
He
a
did.
Cardinals
And he was
game?
like back at practice on Wednesday or something.
And you're right, he does get red.
Yeah.
And Zim had to be told, like, facilities closed for you and you only during the 2017 OTAs as he had to go recover from his, like, at that time, I think it was his 6th or 7th eye surgery.
Yeah. Wasn't he supposed to be laying, like, horizontal face down?
Yes, and he was pissed that he was told, go to the ranch and recover. Like, he wouldn't answer Rick Spielman's phone calls for a couple days, which I think just shows you that this is not somebody who's going to, like, bend to the virus. The virus bends to me is what a lot of these coaches think.
You're right.
You'll find out quickly if they can actually combat it. I mean, these are the most unhealthy lifestyles possible where you're working 14, 15, 16 hours a day and your health is not great to begin with. A lot of guys are overweight. I'm not saying that, anything specific to these two in their situation, but, like, your health is just not great. I mean,
and you ordinarily don't care, right? It's like, I'm not healthy. What the heck?
I'm so
it's like
fascinated.
sleep when you're dead type thing. I mean, that
Every
literally
NFL
came from an
coach-
NFL head coach.
Yeah, they all, like, by the end of their run, they all look like Andy Reid, or Mike McCarthy. I want to know
Mike
what
McCarthy.
is Cliff Kingsbury going to look like 65 pounds heavier in like 12 years? Is he still going to be wearing the boat shoes with no socks?
I don't know that he worries enough about ordinary coach stuff. That's a really good question on Kingsbury.
He's not.
I feel
he's
like
not plowing
McVay and
carbs at
Kingsbury
midnight.
are like, yeah, okay. I'm a quarterback guy. That's my life.
So my tale of the tape here. All right, this is very much a toss-up because, like Courtney said, you've got one is viewed as an expert and a guru in quarterbacks and offense. The other is viewed as an expert and a guru in cornerback development and defense. And neither guy has won a Super Bowl as a head coach, but both guys have this pedigree. And both guys are just sort of like they both just need like that one big break with a great quarterback or something. And so the reason I'm going to give the edge to Bruce Arians is it's only like it's like a feather on the scale for me. In 2015, the Arizona Cardinals went 13-3. They won the division, and they went to the Super Bowl and got beat by the Carolina Panthers in the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, in the NFC Championship game. They went to the doorstep of the Super Bowl, is what I meant to say, and then they lost to the Panthers in the championship game. In the same fashion, the Vikings lost to the Eagles a couple years later in 2017. He maxed out Carson Palmer at age 36. Bruce Arians did in that season. Carson Palmer had career highs in yards per attempt, in QBR, in passer, like literally everything, yards per game. It was Carson Palmer's best season as an NFL quarterback under Bruce Arians. And so Bruce Arians, when given the right tools offensively and the right quarterback, can give you a 13-3 and a doorstep of the Super Bowl. I'm thinking if Tom Brady can be what Carson Palmer was in 2015, then I think they win the Super Bowl. So I'm going to give the slight edge
in
to Bruce
Tampa,
Arians.
right?
Was that where
I believe it's there.
the Super Bowl is in Tampa this year?
Yeah,
I believe
this
it
year
is,
it's
yeah.
in Tampa,
Is it?
yeah.
They would play host to
No.
it.
That'd be interesting. So, all right, total offense. Who do you give the edge to, Vikings or Buccaneers?
I give the edge to the Bucs just because the chemistry that Brady already has, and granted, we're seeing him work out all the time. Is Kirk Cousins working out? No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to go down that route. I just think it's hilarious that Tom Brady has basically dropped a giant bleep you to the NFLPA and continues to host these workouts. You know, if Stephon Diggs was still in Minnesota, because Justin Jefferson is an unproven commodity at this point, and Adam Thielen's going to be on the receiving end of double teams, I'm not so sure that that's going to come along as quickly as possible. Kirk is a quarterback, like we've talked about. You need him to trust you before you actually get the chance. I mean, Kyle Rudolph has not so subliminally mentioned that exact same thing. Stephon Diggs, in his, I think it was either his going away column with the Players Tribune or something else, has kind of said the same thing, that Kirk is not a guy that's going to give you a chance. You have to earn that with him. I mean, with Tom Brady, he's got, like I mentioned, he's got 2 Pro Bowl receivers, and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. If you don't have him on your fantasy team for starters, start there. And I think that you have the most dynamic tight end in the game when he's healthy. And for me, that's, the offensive line is moot at this point. The running game for the Bucs is moot at this point. Yes, Brady's going to need more help as he gets older, and especially at 43 years old. It's not just put the team on my back, I'm going to go win a Super Bowl. He's going to need that run game to take some pressure off of him. Good news is there's several running backs that are still out there for cheap on the free agent market, and I would anticipate, people I've spoken with, that that's something that the Bucs would probably be interested in adding at some point before the regular season gets started. So he should be fine. And I think that they're, offense-wise, the Vikings do have a lot of good pieces, but I give the edge to Brady and the Bucs.
Courtney's right. Yeah, the Bucs are going to be dynamic. This is going to be though, to go back to the O-line conversation. This year, watch Tampa. This is going to be a referendum, I believe, on a quarterback delivering the ball quickly, right? Mm-hmm. Because Jameis Winston, to Courtney's point from before, could certainly move more, but he also held the ball more, right? Which Kirk can tend to do. If Brady gets in there and it's boom, 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 and the offensive line is improved in Tampa, but it's still not great, we should watch that closely because we do tend to judge lines on sacks. And sacks can be the fault of the line, but they can also be the fact of a quarterback who holds the ball and pats it too long. Brady, Manning, guys like that don't do that. And so I do think the interesting thing is going to watch from 2019 to 2020, that Tampa Bay line with 2 very different quarterbacks in how they go about their business. And Brady is not mobile, but he delivers the ball quickly. But for all of the reasons that Courtney gave with the wide receivers, the tight ends in Tampa, all of that, Tampa Bay does get the advantage over the Vikings.
Yeah,
She's right.
I give Tampa the offensive edge as well. I think the only discernible area of advantage for the Vikings offensively is Dalvin Cook. I think I would take Dalvin Cook over Ronald Jones. But other than that, now that if Stephon Diggs was still on the team, you could say, all right, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, that's pretty damn good. But I don't know, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, if those guys are healthy. Put it this way when it comes to the Buccaneers offense. Their backup tight end now, O.J. Howard, averages 16 yards per catch in 3 years in the NFL. Their backup tight end would be probably a top, if given the targets of other top tight ends, he'd be in the mix as a guy who could go for 1,000 yards. And that dude's coming off the bench behind Rob Gronkowski. On the offensive line point, I'm a firm believer that quarterbacks oftentimes can make or break pass blocking and offensive lines as well. I mean, Peyton Manning had a year as a statue in Indianapolis where he got sacked 9 times. Dan Marino had a year in the 80s where he got sacked 6 times in a full year. I mean, yeah, the offensive line's probably played well, but those guys know what they're doing. They know how to get away. They know how to set up cover, protections and stuff. And so it's very likely that Tom Brady makes the Buccaneers offensive line better. And so if you were going to say, well, the Vikings might have a better offensive line, if Ezra Cleveland pans out or something, I don't know. I think Tom Brady probably changes that. So, all right, total defense, tail of the tape, Courtney.
It's hard here because I look at all the adjustments Mike Zimmer made midway through last season when he realized that things were kind of falling apart and how many new faces that this unit has. I mean, when you look at a Bucs team that has, some really, really good pass rushers, I mean, Ndamukong Suh is still there. Shaq Barrett is excellent. Even Jason Pierre-Paul, for however old he is now, is still a highly productive player. I don't think that their front seven gets nearly as much credit as it's probably due. I mean, their secondary is young, and they've got a couple staples back there. I think of Sean Murphy Bunting is kind of, that's the guy that I think of when I think of their cornerbacks, which is not really it's kind of a no-name unit. But where I think the dividing line for me here is with Levante David and Shaq Barrett, the 1-2 punch that they have with their linebackers. Can that stack up to Eric Kendricks and Anthony Barr? Sure, it can, but Shaq Barrett has the sack numbers. Neither Kendricks nor Barr do. And granted, it is a different style of defense. They play a 3-4, and I think it's, an off-ball 3-4. So, I'll probably give the Bucs the advantage here simply for the fact that by the time that this game would happen is December, right? December 5th. It's week 15, week 14. So the Vikings, at least at that point, should have figured out, okay, who's your starting cornerback? Are you still at a rotation at that point? You'd like to think that they have some contributions from their rookie, Jeff Gladney, who should at that point be a starting outside corner. If you don't pick up a veteran cornerback to play nickel, that should be Mike Hughes, and then the outside spot is either Cameron Dantzler or Holton Hill. There's too many question marks there for me to go ahead and give the Bucs the advantage. So, to give the Vikings the advantage. So I'm going to give the Bucs the advantage here with the defense as well.
Yeah, this is tough. If the Vikings knew or had stability at the corners, I think I'd go Vikings for sure. Because then you say Zim's got his guys at the corners. 3 years back, those guys were fantastic, especially Rhodes was. They're gone now. I'd be tempted to give Zim the advantage if I thought there was a coaching advantage on that side of the ball. But Todd Bowles, I think, has, again, and we've seen this 1,000 times, proven that just because you're a lousy head coach does not mean that you're a bad coordinator. In fact, Bowles is a very good coordinator.
Turned that unit around last year.
They were number 1 in the league in rush defense, and that's in a division with guys like Kamara and McCaffrey. That is a very good running back division. And so because of what Courtney said, and also because I do believe that defense is incredibly well coached as well in Tampa, I'm going to go advantage Tampa. I'm not going to say it by a lot, but I think if you just look at what they have currently in place, if you were the Vikings, you say we might be there, close to there right now, but we're probably not as good as they are.
Yeah, we just don't know yet, what that defense is going to be. I mean, the defensive line is probably the most stable, the linebacker core, but the defensive line then's supposed to be the most stable unit. And we don't know how Fadi Odenigbo is going to be able to handle that pass rushing duty left vacant by Everson Griffin. I mean, there's too much newness And I think that you can certainly combat that. I mean, they did in 2014 when they came in and were inheriting the worst defense in the league, and by midway through the season, it was the strength. Very easily could mirror that trend. I just, I think with the shortened off season and not having your guys out there on the field to like teach them how to play cornerback in Mike Zimmer's defense,
that's a big deal. Yes.
That's hard. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
So 2014 is actually the reason I'm going to give the Vikings the tail of the tape advantage here. I think the gap is much closer than it would have been going into last year with the Buccaneers defense. One thing to note on the Buccaneers defense, according to Pro Football Focus, they are one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's something that like you can just like you can fix that a little easier than like your cornerbacks not being able to cover, opposing wide receivers. Like, I'd rather have to go into an offseason fixing tackling than fixing, like, I don't have a guy who can get to the quarterback off the edge, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So, Courtney brought up 2014. The Vikings had the worst defense in the NFL at the end of the Leslie Frazier run as head coach. Mike Zimmer takes over, and it was just like the roster was a disaster. They did draft Xavier Rhodes. Danielle Hunter was not there yet. Everson Griffin was on the roster, but they didn't have, even like right now, they've got a bunch of question marks, but they didn't have an Eric Kendricks. They didn't have a Danielle Hunter or a Harrison Smith or an Anthony Harris. Like, they didn't have guys like that. And they still were 11th in points allowed by the end of that season in 2014. I think, like, Mike Zimmer just is great at molding a ball of clay to this point in his career. And do I think they're going to have the best defense in the NFL after the molding of the clay this year? No, I do not. But I still think when all is said and done, at the end of the year, by the time they play the Buccaneers in December, they're going to have a top 10 points defense going into that game. And then it just depends on, like, are the Buccaneers in that same range? We'll see. The final tail of the tape here is just total team. When these teams meet head-to-head late in the season, who would you pick? Who would you pick? I'll start here, actually, because I think if this game were being played in Minnesota at US Bank Stadium, despite giving most of the tallies in the tail of the tape to the Buccaneers, I would say home field advantage could make a huge difference. But because the game is being played in Tampa Bay, I'm going to say total team, I'm giving it to the Buccaneers. Courtney?
Yeah, I already picked the Buccaneers, so I'm sticking with them on my prediction for whatever that December game is. You bring up a good point about US Bank Stadium, but the good thing is here, it's not being played at US Bank Stadium, so we don't have to hypothesize about that. I think it'll be a nice break for the Vikings, considering how many of the warm weather games that they have at that point of the year to be able to stay competitive. And maybe even keep the game close. But I just think the edge is going to be with Brady in the offense because, like we said, he's somebody who can take over and make checks at the line of scrimmage and change the play and do things that Kirk Cousins hasn't demonstrated he can do yet. So that's where the advantage lies for me.
Yeah, team-wise Bucs. In fact, I'm certainly not going to be shocked if the Vikings win that game in particular. Mm-hmm. But if I had to pick the teams and just say, okay, if I could have your team for 2020, I would prefer Tampa. Now, that might be very short term, but you just look at the intangibles and the things that Tampa Bay has going for it. And the Vikings' problem now, I think, is this. It's just the unknowns, right, you guys? It's the unknowns at cornerback. It's the unknowns of defensively. Is Barr's role going to change? Because if it changes,
I don't think it's going to.
I don't either.
Conversations that I've had,
but if it did, Courtney,
it's going to change, but it should.
Yeah, exactly. Think about that. Yeah, it is. I mean, there's so many things about the Vikings now going into camp that we don't know, that it's very hard to confidently say, I think they're going to be great. I think that they'll be good. I certainly expect them to be competitive throughout the course of the season. But there's a lot of things that I can't sit here and confidently tell you about this team right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, all right, well, that's a wrap here, and we're getting closer to the AFC opponents here. At some point, we will get to Super Bowl tail of the tape. I don't know. There's still a few NFC teams. We haven't done the 49ers yet in the NFC. There's still some other teams in the NFC that are
AFC, we're going to have to do the
Rams.
Browns for sure, right? Stefanski, Zimble.
I'm not ready. I'm
In
not ready.
Tampa?
Third week
ready
of the
for that.
preseason currently.
We actually should go through all the
That's right.
preseason opponents and their full
Well,
rosters.
we're down to 2 now. Thank God we're only down to 2.
happens.
And we might be down to 0. If the players get their way, we'll have
Yes.
no preseason games.
All right, that's a wrap on this episode of Purple Daily for Phil Mackey, myself, Judd Zilgad, Courtney Cronin. We'll see you next time.